Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Look us up in the sports section on Roku. We're there. The vanity code to add it on the Roku website is Dwyer Boxing News, one word. The name of that site is Dwyer Boxing and Sports News. On iTunes, one word, Dwyer Boxing News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. You know, years ago, a heavyweight named Ruslan Chagayev used to call himself White Tyson, right? But Chagayev never had the punching power to be a white version of Mike Tyson, right? This is boxing. Sometimes guys come up with racially charged nicknames. Well, if anybody is a Mike Tyson clone, in my opinion, in boxing today, it's David Lemieux, right? But understand, being Mike Tyson has a downside. As anyone who watched the Buster Douglas and Evander Holyfield fights knows, and I'm talking about before Tyson faded completely at the end, right? Losing to, you know, a bunch of people at the end. You know, Mike Tyson hit extremely hard with both hands and had hand speed and fully committed to his punches. In other words, when he threw hooks, they were with the intention of trying to take you out. He was all in. So too is David Lemieux. It's very hard, I mean very hard, to make it through the first few rounds of a David Lemieux fight without getting put on the canvas. Right? But two of the more riveting fights you'll see are Buster Douglas against Mike Tyson and Marco Antonio Rubio against David Lemieux. Now, I know Rubio recently lost to Gennady Golovkin, but understand, Rubio is a very talented fighter. And you saw that night against David Lemieux. Right? Lemieux came out and looked like David Lemieux. One punch, knockout power in both hands. In my opinion, he hits harder than Gabe the King Rosado. In my opinion, he's more two-handed than Gabe the King Rosado. In my opinion, Rosado's better on the outside, as he was against Brian Vera in his last fight. Big knockout boxing. It doesn't show up on boxrec.com, but you need to look at the film of that fight. Rosado is better outside. Lemieux, like Tyson, is better inside, right? But the point is, against Marco Antonio Rubio, Lemieux looked exactly like Mike Tyson looked against Buster Douglas. Starts getting hit with a straight jab. Had a plan A, which was, as is the case with all of these big boxers, go in, knock out the other guy, right? When the other guy lingered around a little bit, Lemieux didn't have a plan B. Worse yet, like most bullies, like most guys who are accustomed to coming in and being the power puncher in the fight, Lemieux didn't really know how to play defense, right? Lemieux couldn't even find a balance between defense and offense once he started getting hit with shots. Not only was Lemieux unprepared for it, his corner was as unprepared as Mike Tyson's corner was back for the Buster Douglas fight. You remember the days when Tyson's corner would have not an end swell, but a balloon, trying to, you know, alleviate the swelling. You remember when Tyson's corner looked clueless back in the day? That's how clueless Lemieux's corner looked. Right? It was so bad that even though Lemieux was unbeaten going into that Marco Antonio Rubio fight, his corner threw in the towel. Lemieux started getting roughed up, and his corner understood, hey, our guy, the heavy-handed guy in the bout, against the guy with a big KO ratio. Right? Our guy fighting at the Bell Center in Canada before his home crowd after coming in the ring to a standing ovation. Right? Our guy doesn't know how to play defense here. We need to pull the plug before he gets badly hurt. That's what happened. Then, of course, Lemieux lost the second fight to Alcine, and people understood that he was a big puncher without much of a plan B. Well, let me say this. As is the case with Mike Tyson, if you want to see Tyson dominated, the fight is the first fight against Holyfield. Right? Holyfield starts to tee off on Mike Tyson late. Just understand that Lemieux's plan A is so compelling that he's favored in this fight against Rosado, who has fought the much tougher competition. Right? Rosado, for example, has fought middleweight champion, currently unbeaten fighter. He abdicated the crown after the fight, but he was a champ when he fought Rosado, Peter Quillin. Understand that Rosado fought Jermell Charlo, who's a name you need to write down. He's unbeaten. He's making his way up the ranks. Understand, Rosado has fought people like Alfredo Angulo. Rosado fought Gennady Golovkin already. Right? He fought Jillian Love when Jillian Love was unbeaten. Rosado fought and beat Jesus Soto Caras. But if I had one bet to make here, right, if I had one bet to make, and it's not the bet I'm going to make, but if I had one bet to make, it would be on David Lemieux. Why? Because it's hard to make it to the later rounds against David Lemieux. Because an experienced fighter like Marco Antonio Rubio walked a tightrope in doing so. Right? These Tyson Lemieux types, they're flawed. Right? These guys can get hit by a jab. If they don't knock you out, then they look like Tyson did in the later rounds. Well, the last few rounds, at least, of his fight against Lennox Lewis. Right? Where a guy with reach can start to tee off. But I don't believe that's who Gabriel Rosado is. I think Rosado himself is a banger. Right? Rosado has a very nice right hand, and he likes to use it. Right? Rosado is a fighter who's not in there to win by decision. Right? So I think he's going to try to trade bullets with David Lemieux. And let's just say that's a recipe for disaster. Right? If I had one bet to make, well, put it this way, if I had a gun to my head and I was asked the winner of this fight, I would say I'm expecting David Lemieux to win the fight. But the way I'm playing this is to take both guys by KO. Right? I just don't see David Lemieux going 12 rounds. I just don't. Right? I also don't see Gabriel Rosado deciding to do what's necessary to go 12 rounds against David Lemieux. I'm expecting someone to get knocked out. I think Lemieux's going to have the upper hand inside, and as is Lemieux's pattern, as was Mike Tyson's pattern, I expect Lemieux to push the issue, to try to get inside and to try to let his hands go. Understand, Lemieux has a KO ratio that's on par with Gennady Golovkin's. Right? So I'm expecting Lemieux to come in bombs away. Now, Marco Antonio Rubio was able to cover up. But I believe Gabriel Rosado, a Philly fighter fighting in New York City, who feels that the Eastern Seaboard belongs to him. Right? I'm expecting Gabriel Rosado to be so pleased to not be in the ring with a technician like Jermell Charlo, to actually have a guy firing bullets at him. But I think Rosado is going to try to throw the kind of right hands that took out Brian Vera. I'm seeing a heavy action fight. I'll personally be surprised if this fight makes it to the 9th round. The bet I'm recommending is both guys by KO. Why am I not fooling around with an over-under? Because I want all 12 rounds in the match. But make no mistake, I'm expecting someone here to get stopped. Also, what I want people to do is to look at how heavy-handed David Lemieux is in both hands. Simply put, he's one of boxing's hardest punchers, pound for pound, in any weight class. Right? For those of you in the United States who haven't heard of this guy, because of his loss to Rubio and the fact that it sidetracked his career, right? The Rubio fight was 3 years ago. Right? Lemieux then lost another fight. He's just making it back to prime time. Don't confuse a lack of exposure with a lack of punching power. Right? Gabriel Rosado is going to be on the clock from the opening bell. This is going to be different than his match against Brian Vera, because Vera doesn't hit remotely as hard as David Lemieux. Right? The challenge to Rosado is going to be whether he can land enough of his big shots early before Lemieux lands his. I'm expecting someone to get knocked out. My recommendation is that you bet distance on this fight and take both guys by KO. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Look, I agree. Rosado has fought the much tougher competition. There's no question about it. Right? There's no question about it. I'll concede that point. Right? But at the same time, when a guy hits as hard as Lemieux does with both hands, and when he's facing an opponent who's not that defensively gifted, look at the punishment Rosado took in that Gennady Golovkin fight. Right? When you know Lemieux is going to land shots, if you thought Mike Tyson was going to land shots against an opponent, right, would you think that fight goes the distance? I think Lemieux pound for pound hits on a Tyson level, and understand, I feel Tyson's one of the hardest punchers I've ever seen. Right? I'm expecting fireworks. I'm expecting a knockout. Right? I'm going really more with what the fighters have than what their resume suggests. By the way, I'll concede that Alcine Lemieux fight did go 12 rounds. But understand, Alcine, a fighter who tailed off late in his career and was, vulnerable to early knockouts. Right? Just understand that Alcine, while he may have been chinny, had better defense, in my opinion, than Gabe Rosado. I'm expecting a knockout here. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.